All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us to the Empirical Enlightenment Podcast. I'm here with Hanna with HZBTherapy.com. Am I saying that correct?
You are. It's actually Hana though, which is my bad. I should have told you that.
What did I say?
It's Hana versus Hannah.
Hana, not Hannah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
expect
Yeah.
you to know that from reading it though.
Oh, no. That's fine. Is it Danish, like Hans type?
It's German.
German.
Although
Okay.
it might
Well.
be Danish too. It's also Hawaiian, so who knows?
Oh, yeah. Hana.
Mhm.
Hana actually means flower in Japanese, so that's easy to remember. Um,
That.
so yeah, you mostly focus on couples therapy. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. I
Great.
exclusively now
Exclusively
focus
focus
on.
on couples therapy.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a couple individual clients that I've been working with for so long that, I don't want to stop, but I only work with, in terms of new clients, I only take couples now.
Exclusively couples. Oh,
Mhm.
that's great. Okay. So um, I know there's a couple things that I specifically wanted to talk to you about. Mostly, so my background, I have a PhD in physiology and pharmacology, so I'm kind of a science nerd. But yeah, I know you talked about how love is a biological necessity.
Mhm.
Uh, let's hear about that.
Okay. So the way that I think about it and sometimes talk about it is, unlike other animals, we don't have fangs or sharp claws or great speed or amazing strength. But what we did have in terms of being able to survive was the ability to cooperate and to work together. And so, because of that, right, we are wired to survive by working together and cooperating and
Mm,
protecting one another. Um, and so, I think that there's several different parts about when I say love is a biological necessity. Part of it is that when we're born, we are like the most helpless infants, right? I mean, a deer, I think, can walk within an hour of birth. A turtle is born and instinctively knows how to go to water. And we need people to take care of us for years, right?
right.
And so our brain is actually designed to develop outside of the womb and through social interaction. So love is literally how we build a functional brain. And there's, a lot of different studies. One of the most famous studies is a study of the orphanage in Romania. You've probably heard of it because it's pretty famous, where children got all of their needs met, their physical needs, food, water, shelter, but they didn't get very much human attention, affection, interaction.
Yeah.
And so what happened was their brains were very underdeveloped
Wow.
and some of them didn't even survive. And so that really shows the power and the necessity of human interaction and connection in order to thrive and in order to have fully developed brains.
Just a quick note on that. Did they do that on purpose? From what I remember in the study, that it almost implied that they were doing that on purpose, or was that just a consequence of there not being people there to, you know, hold them and kiss them and
Yeah, I would hope that it was not on purpose.
it was not on purpose. I
Yes,
mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, there's a lot of messed up scientific studies out there.
there have been a lot of missed up. I totally agree. So I would hope
Yeah.
that it wasn't. But, I have probably purposely never thought about that part.
Just block it out.
Yeah, I'm
It's a
really good at blocking things
defense
out.
mechanism. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I'm very talented in that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. It's something that we definitely evolved to be in a community and be in a tribe, and we definitely need some kind of love, even when we're straight out of the gate. It's interesting. You'd think it would be more along the lines of um, needing to fit in with the group.
Hmm.
So like, oh, I love you, you love me, and we'll look out for each other. But it seems like it's something that's more innate because a baby needs it, and a baby has nothing to offer, you know, as far as survival is concerned. I mean, survival of the species, but not of the person.
Right.
But as far as it's not a mutual thing, which makes it really interesting how it's something almost metaphysical rather than something obviously evolutionarily necessary. It's like, oh, I'll use love as a way to, reproduce and get what I want, but a baby's not like that. So interesting.
Yeah, how it's so innate from a baby in terms of
Yeah,
being wired to attach.
something different going on. Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I want to talk a little bit about loneliness. You were saying love is something that's a biological necessity, and I know there's been a lot of studies that have shown that if you're alone, it's very akin to um, heart disease. It's like the same. It's like worse. And it's like smoking or something, where it really damages you really bad. All your organs start shutting down and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um, why do you think we didn't why do you think we can't handle that? Like, why can't we be alone?
Well, I think it goes back to how our nervous system detects danger when we are alone, right? And so because of that, I mean, I think if I actually slow down even there, right? We're always looking for whether we're safe or in danger. And our limbic system, our brain computes being alone as being in danger, as being
Oh,
threatened. And so then, right, it sends a signal to our nervous system, hey, we're in danger. And then our nervous system releases cortisol.
no,
And from there, right, if we have high amounts of cortisol, we have higher blood pressure, we have mental health deterioration, we have lower immune functioning. So I think that,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so it puts you in constant fight or flight, basically, and
exactly.
until you find somebody to be with who can take care of you, make you safe. I wonder if that's what's going on with the babies. They're in some kind of a permanently stressed state, and so
Totally.
um, rather than being in the growth and anabolic phase, the part where you start building your cells up, they're in this constant like crying, "Hey, come help me" type phase,
Or
and so
shut
that's
down.
or shut down.
Yeah, yeah, because
Yeah,
all babies will eventually shut down if no one's coming for them, and their
they
body
just
shuts down too.
do you think it's because they tire themselves out, or it's just why do you think they're shutting down? Out of curiosity.
I think it's adaptation to the environment.
Adaptation.
Yeah, I think we all adapt. I mean, even in relationships, what I'll see in couples is that someone will start out pursuing and they might pursue for years, but over time, someone will become what I call a burnt out pursuer. It's the same
Oh
thing,
yeah.
right?
So you're talking about people who are already in a relationship, and one's being chased, and one's the chaser, and then eventually the person who's chasing too much gives up.
Yeah, they don't even give up. It's that their bodies start to get burnt out, right? It is
Oh
adaptive,
no.
right? It's adaptive because they are in that high stress state for so long. And none of us can tolerate being in that high stress state without it starting to take a toll on our bodies, kind of like you were saying.
Yeah. So they're permanently in the fight or flight state,
Hmm.
trying to find love from this other person
Hmm.
who's just not having it, and then
Hmm.
eventually they start to break down.
Hmm. Hmm.
So uh, this is kind of probably a question you're not able to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
It sounds almost like a genie's wish. So let's say a couple's in a relationship and maybe it's uneven, where one person loves the other person a lot more than the other.
Hmm.
Um, you can't change the person's heart, right? Like in Aladdin, you can't wish a person to love you or whatever. But if they're in a relationship, and maybe that person does want to love that person, but they don't know how, what advice would you give if a couple's in that relationship? How do you change the human heart,
So,
Hana?
what I can relate to there is that it looks like a partner loves the other person more than the other.
Okay.
Demonstrate it differently. I operate from an attachment frame. And so I assume if two people are in a relationship, and I check with them, I say, do you want to be in this relationship? Right? Do you have the same
That's the
agenda?
first good question. Yeah.
First question, right? That's something that we all need to check for if we're doing couples therapy is, do they have the same agenda? And if not, then we need to talk about that. Most couples
Yeah.
come in with the same agenda, which is we want our relationship to be okay. What happens though is that one person sometimes demonstrates love much more overtly than another person.
Mm,
And
I see.
that's where,
Okay.
yeah, that's where. So what I would do then is I would help the person that doesn't demonstrate love, I would help them access their emotional experience more, because that's usually what it is. It's that they're just not that in touch with their emotions for a lot of good reasons. And
Yeah.
so I will help start to drip the emotion, so that they can start to feel it with me. But I also will help the other person look for signs of what I would refer to as safety, which would be also signs of love. So sometimes
Yeah.
we have to scan for those, and we have to really work with our brains to look for them, because our brain isn't going to look for them on their own.
I see. So when you're working with people, is that the primary motivation, when you're conveying to one partner or the other? Like, you show love, but you also show safety to your partner, as in, like, the reason why they're standoffish is because maybe they don't feel safe to express their emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they are the way they are. Or is it more the person who's um, not being very loving is not conveying safety to that person,
Mm-hmm.
and so they feel like, it's the burnt out lover or whatever? Or is
Mm-hmm.
it kind of a mix of both?
I think it depends. I view couples as systems. And
Okay.
so when I see if there's safety or not, it's, is there safety in the system? And if there's not safety
Okay,
in the
the whole
system,
system.
yeah.
Okay.
If there's not safety in the system, it's usually because both people are contributing to that in some way. And it's mostly unconscious and unintentional and confusing as to why their partner keeps getting so reactive or defensive or doesn't respond well, because they don't
Yeah.
realize that they're sending danger signals.
Okay. So you're saying it's when you're a relationship therapist, you look at the relationship itself rather than the individual who may be causing it, because usually there's two sides to a story. Is that kind of the...
I do. The way that I work, I don't think all couples therapists do that at all.
Okay.
But the way that I work is that, yes, I see them as a system that we co-create. It's a relationship is a process that we're constantly both a part of.
I see. I think that's a really cool way to look at it, rather than like attacking somebody or something. Be like, oh, you have childhood trauma or something, and that's why you're such a horrible person or something like that. You look at it as its own living thing to work on,
Yeah, I think it's really helpful if we all do that, honestly. If we all look at our relationship as a living thing to take care of.
rather than, this is what I contribute, this is what you contribute.
Hmm.
Let's keep score or something like that.
Right.
You look at it as a whole, like its own individual thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
I like that a lot. So what are some of the tricks you use to help people feel safe in a relationship? Like, how do you
Mm.
what's your secret? No, you don't have to go too deep into it, but like, what do you do to help couples feel safe, or how do you, like, make the relationship feel safe?
Yeah, that's complicated, of course, because I'm an experiential therapist. And so I work with couples in session to try and create reparative conversations and new corrective experiences. So
Okay.
that is the goal. And so versus a lot of people will practice what's called a top-down therapy, which is working more on skills. Like Gottman therapy would be top-down, and it's great. It has a lot of merit and a lot of wonderful parts of it. I work with bottom-up therapy, and so I'm working with the emotions, the somatic experiencing, and what I'm trying to do is to help them, first of all, create safety together. And so some of the ways
Yep.
that I will do that is that I kind of am a choreographer in session, especially at first, is I choreograph what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. I do that though by first accessing their own truth within them. So I'll walk someone through and I'll say, okay, tell me about what goes on inside of you, what goes on inside of your head, what is the story, what does that feel like? Right? And then I put it together in a new and different way, and I ask them to share it with their partner. That's how we start to create safety, because they're sharing something new and something vulnerable.
Yep. Yeah. I see. So, um, I saw that you kind of focus a little bit on the limbic system. So in your sessions, do you actually do like physical things as well? Like I don't know, put an ice pack on their neck or something like that. I've seen different things like that. It's like you need to calm down. We'll cool you off, literally. Um,
No, I don't. That would be DBT though.
yeah.
Dialectical behavior therapy would totally say that's one of the tools is, yeah, go outside, put snow on your face, right? How do you shock your system?
Right, right. Okay. So but you don't go after people physically. It's all mostly talk and that kind of stuff.
So it's talk, but it's also working with the body. And
Okay.
so I am trying to work somatically with them, but through talking. And so
Through
what I'm
talking.
trying to do is track in session, right? I'm using my body to sync with their body. And we have what's called these mirror neurons, which
Yep.
is right when we look at one another, that we can experience what the other person is feeling. And that's
Yep.
also referred to sometimes as limbic resonance. Right? And so that's working with the limbic system, is that we are resonating limbically. I am seeing my brain, my limbic system is picking up on cues of safety or danger or cues of
Yep.
different emotions. And and so I'm helping people slow down and take in their experience of that. And I'm also helping people create new experiences of that. And so sometimes that again means me helping someone take in cues of safety that are there, but that they can't see because maybe they're so protected.
That's really cool. Yeah. I don't know if you've done LSD before. But if you haven't, I won't make you expose it if you have or haven't. But I have a friend who did it, and no, it was me. But basically, that limbic resonance system goes into overdrive. It's
Mm,
gnarly. Like you'll be sitting there and you'll like look at the person across from you and you'll feel like you're thinking the exact same thoughts.
mhm,
It's super trippy.
mhm.
So I didn't know there was a word for that, limbic resonance,
Yeah.
but and I didn't know how to explain it when that was happening. I was like, oh, this is why people at Woodstock were having these amazing experiences with music that I didn't understand. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you just needed some drugs, but no, I that's totally what's happening when you're on LSD.
Hmm.
At least a certain
Mhm.
part of the trip, but where you're like you feel like you're connected, you're one with the person.
Mhm.
And I've never really felt that before I did LSD. So um, it sounds like you found a way to do it without drugs where you can kind of pull that out. So do you have the couples do that together so they kind of look at each other and you try and sync that
Yes,
frequency?
I do. I don't do that at first. At first, I have them do it with me. I'm actually what I think of as their secure attachment figure at first in session, because they can't
Oh,
be
okay.
one another's secure attachment figure most of the time. But
That's why they're seeing you probably, yeah, because they're
yes, so
in
first
trouble. Yeah.
I'm creating safety with us, right? And I'm
Yeah.
establishing that, which allows them then to access these parts of themselves. And then I ask them to take a risk and to share it with their partner. And I'm there to catch them if it doesn't go well, because it doesn't always go well, but I'm
Yeah.
there. So if
Yeah.
their partner can't respond well, I will.
It's like a bad trip or something. No, it's similar to no, an LSD trip. Not to talk about drugs the whole time, but it's like that. It depends on who's in the room with you, and
Mm,
you really feed off each other's emotions and fears and joys, and that's why people listen to certain kinds of music, because it helps keep the vibe good. Uh,
hmm
but that's really cool. Do you do any kind of breath work? Because I know breath work can kind of
hmm hmm
pull out some of that.
hmm
Uh,
I won't do breath work unless someone's super dysregulated and needs me to help them ground them. Then I will do breath work.
okay. Oh
But
wow.
in general, I recommend breath work. But because I'm working more on teaching them how to co-regulate, I'm doing less self-regulation, unless again I need to. Then I will
Yeah.
help them self-regulate first in order to come in and co-regulate with one another.
Okay. So you'll help them calm down once they're in a certain state of mind.
hmm
Then when they're talking to the other person, um, they can kind of connect that way.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's almost like I don't mean to be vulgar or whatever, but it almost sounds like you're hacking people, not in a bad way
Sure, sure.
necessarily. Am I misrepresenting it? Because I would say under normal circumstances, that's not um, traditionally anyway what people would do in a loving relationship. I would say, they're just like, oh, these are my duties, these are yours. Um, you know, let's raise our kids or let's go on vacation. But as
hmm
far as like staring each other down and trying to sync up your limbic system,
hmm
I've never heard of that before.
hmm
But it sounds like a really good idea.
hmm
Um, but it definitely sounds like almost a shortcut or a hack or something like that. What
hmm
do you have to say?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think the only thing is that I'm trying to be transparent about my hacking, right?
Okay,
And
yeah,
so, because I don't want people to think I'm coming in and trying to trick them. But what I am trying to do is help them access parts of themselves that are there and
that are
share
there.
them in
Yeah,
ways that they don't know how, because no one's ever shown them how to share them. And you're right. You're so right. We don't talk to each other in the way that I ask couples to talk to each other in session,
yeah,
because generally life doesn't permit for us to slow down and look at one
no,
another in the eye and hold each
yeah,
other's hand and feel safe enough to access our own most vulnerable emotions first and then to share them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's probably I like how you kind of focus on the individual first, make sure that they're all right to do that, so they don't, fall apart mid-session, and maybe there's some demons in there that they're not ready to face or something like that.
hmm hmm
Um, and
Yeah,
that's
there's
the
a
same
lot with
thing that
trauma.
happens a lot with trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing these limbic resonance sessions, I know this is probably not the best question, but does it take a while to get people to be able to do that? Or I'm sure it heavily depends, but generally speaking, uh, getting people to agree to do that and actually, sync up, is that something that takes a long time usually, or can you
That's so
do it
hard
within
to
like?
say, honestly,
Yeah, yeah.
because
I figured it was a bad
there's,
question, but
I mean, it's not a bad question. It's a fair question. And most couples want to know, how long is it going to take? And
yeah,
then I have to know, well, how dysregulated are you two? How escalated are your patterns? Right? How much safety is there in the relationship? And if there's not, the less safety in the relationship, the longer it's gonna take, and the more trauma generally, the longer it's gonna take. And so in no way fault people that it takes longer, because
Yeah.
oftentimes we're working with layers and layers of experiences.
And you're able to accomplish this mostly with just words, like a guided session,
Yes.
not like drugs or breath work or
No,
I don't
not
know.
just no, but I will say that it doesn't feel like just words, because
Okay.
it is just words if we look at it just outside, if you're just watching a video, but it's a felt experience of emotions that I'm working with. And it's me being there with someone
Yeah.
else's emotional experience. And so that is actually me talking less and being there more and reflecting with them more, that I see them, I get it, I'm there with them.
Yeah. Um, this is another bad question, but I guess that's all you're going to get from me.
All good.
Uh, why do you think, or how do a lot of these couples become so discordant? You said at the beginning that you make sure that at least they're willing to try, try and be in the relationship
Mhm.
together. And so if they're trying to be in the relationship together, what's causing all this discord? Is it just life? Is it trauma? Is it a combination of all those things? How do relationships get so bad? If you had to like, the top three reasons or whatever why they get so bad, I'm sure there's many reasons. But what causes couples to collapse like that and end up needing therapy?
Mhm. Yeah, so I have so many different ideas about this. I'm just trying to sort through my ideas. I think one of the things that happens is that when we get in a relationship, at first it's so exciting and new that we're really present.
Yeah.
And we're really thoughtful about how we're showing up and what we're doing, and we're really intentional a lot of the time because it feels so exciting and new and we want to prioritize it. And over time, we start to get into autopilot. And I
Yeah.
think that getting into autopilot in our relationships is one of the biggest culprits, because what happens is that we stop tending to the relationship, but we also start to just live kind of alongside one another. And we
Mm.
start to see one another as part of autopilot. This is part of my life, right? We're just kind of doing life together. Here, you
Yep.
get the groceries, I'm going to get the car wash, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we stop seeing each other as people and as nuanced, as really interesting. And so I
Yeah.
think that's part of it. I think another part of it is attachment. And it's that people are coming from really different attachment styles, and that those inform how we show up in our relationship and can lead to really complicated and confusing cycles where it's not about a lack of love, but it's about how we manage and cope with difficult emotions begins to trigger our partner and vice versa.
I see. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because people run out of steam. When you're in the when you're in the courtship phase, you're like, oh, I got to put my best foot forward. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, and then
Mhm.
you almost present a false avatar of yourself as who you are. Because you're like, oh, I got to get this person,
Mhm.
uh, and but everybody does it, and so you have to do it
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
if you start off as just this bum or whatever who's not buying flowers and who's not treating your partner with respect, then you're not going to get the person to begin with. But then you have kids and stuff like that, so everything like you said goes on autopilot. It's
Mhm.
true, and it's
Mhm.
it's unfortunate
Mhm.
uh that human nature is the way it is and you run out of steam.
Mhm.
So how do you fix that? Do you set like alarms on your phone to tell your partner you love them and to buy them something every
Mhm.
12 hours or something
Mhm.
like that? Or
That might work.
how
I
all
mean,
right, I'll write that down.
yeah, yeah, that might be a brilliant idea. Who knows? I haven't tried that. Um, I think that so the way that you fix being on autopilot is first, are you present within yourself? if we're not present within ourselves first, we can't be present with our partner. And that's usually the biggest issue that I see and that I experience myself.
Yeah,
Right.
for
And so
sure. Yeah.
I relate to it as a human being. It's really hard for us to be present when we have 10 million things to do. I have a list here of like 20 to do things right now.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's so real. And my brain is like, oh, but don't look at that list. Don't look at that list. But at the same time, I'm trying to be present here. And there's just things pulling. My kids are upstairs and our attention is constantly being pulled.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe adding uh, love my partner more or do this to the list and put it pretty high up there, if not the top thing, because maybe in the end, if you and your partner are happy, all those other things will seem less stressful. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I'm not a therapist, but
well, I
yeah.
think that's true. And I think research shows that, right? That ultimately it's not going to be our individual accomplishments that lead to happiness, right? Studies show that you can have tons and tons of accomplishments and not be happy. And that
Yep.
it's the quality of our relationships that determines the level of our happiness. Harvard did an 80-year study on it. There's something else I was going
Literally
to say.
just relationships, not things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Matthew McConaughey talks about that in his book Green Lights. He would run into these people living in trailer parks or these tribes in South America or Africa or something, and they seemed, you know, 10 times happier than some of the most successful people he knows. They've got their family, they've got their 9 kids or whatever, and you'd assume that they'd just be stressed out of their mind, but they clearly focus on what's the most important
Mm-hmm.
rather than you know status or attaining things. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'll turn this into my own therapy session here while I've got you, but I feel like what happened with me is and probably what happens with a lot of dads is it's hard to balance um like status and career and all that stuff and family, because you need status and career to provide for your family.
Mm.
And so for
Yeah.
me, I don't really care about being a CEO or something. None of that really interests me. Maybe that's the scientist in me. I just want to go in the lab and shut the door. But I've found that to be successful, especially in the modern age, you need you know friends, status, accolades, that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And so balancing those two is really hard, at least for me, because it's like, I want to take care of my kids, want to take care of my wife. But to do that, I need these, superficial things that I don't care about really, but I
Mm-hmm.
need them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I feel it's a balancing act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's
But
so true. I think that's true for mothers and fathers, that it's the balancing act and it's all the different directions that we're pulled in. And yeah, it's really difficult um, to balance being family focused and relationship focused with all of the other things. And especially for those of us that are really in love with our careers, that makes
yeah,
it even a more difficult challenge, because that for me, it's not necessarily ambition, but it's that I love what I do. I'm so
yeah,
passionate about it. And so how do I find time to do it all? I can't. And so there's
no,
always
yeah,
that pressure and that stress of, am I doing enough here? Am I doing enough here?
yeah, yeah, and then it just piles up. And yeah, but I do think with people like you focusing on relationships and the individuals and things like that, that's definitely something that is necessary to make sure that people are prioritizing the right things. And I do think that happens, like you said, it happens with both males and females. But I'm just thinking of a lot of the males in my life where they feel that, oh, I'm showing my love by going to work, you know
Yeah.
but what's funny is at least from what I've seen, women don't really care that much about, you know, they don't care about your career that much. As long as you're providing, they don't really care. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that with I don't know if Tiger Woods and these guys are a great example, because a lot of them cheated on their wives and things like that. But I saw one. Um, I don't remember who it was, but it was some famous golfer, and the wife was like going to divorce him because it's like, hey, you play way too much golf, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he's a
Mm-hmm.
professional golfer, and so he probably thought in his mind, it's like, well, you know, knew who I was, and I'm making all this money with golfing.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, like you said, we have love is a biological necessity, and so just having somebody be like, oh, here's money, leave me alone, like I'm doing what I need for the family, so what's your problem,
Mm-hmm.
is not how it works. And I think it's especially not how women work. Not to gender it. I mean, men need love as well, but I feel like with women, if you don't, pay attention to them, if you don't do the little things,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't, show love and, be there for them emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
all that other stuff they could throw in the fire. They don't
Mm-hmm.
care.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's been my experience with a lot of my successful friends.
Mm-hmm.
They have some of the worst relationships, actually, because they're so focused on their careers,
Yeah.
and they're like, hey, I'm doing this for the family, and I'm doing this
Yeah.
for you, what's your problem? But they need love, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely not as simple as just being some super rich guy and throwing money at your wife and your kids. Just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
balancing
totally.
that is hard, because you're like, oh, I want to provide the best life for my wife and kids,
Mm-hmm.
but um, you need to be there as well. So yeah, it's a balancing act, but I do feel like it's one that a lot of people um, use their careers and things as an excuse for failing in those areas,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be my guess.
Yeah. I also think work can be a competing attachment, and that can be really the demise of a relationship, right? If we are turning to work because that's the place where we feel strong and capable and comfortable and we get all this great feedback, the more we
Yeah,
turn to work, the less we're turning to our partner.
yeah,
And that, I think, is a very, very common pattern that I see, where the attachment to work is stronger and more comfortable.
yeah, yeah. And it's easier, right? Because relationships are hard. And
Yes,
so,
amen.
you know, when you go to work, you've got clear goals, there's
Yeah.
not as much emotion involved. But then when you go home and go to your family, it's much more difficult. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've got 3 kids now myself, and I'm not saying this to be funny, but the PhD was much easier than raising children,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is crazy because it was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But raising children is much harder, and
Mm-hmm.
keeping the relationship healthy with my
Mm-hmm.
wife and everything. And we're all doing our best, but it's hard. It is something that requires, I think, strategy, and, like you said, avoiding autopilot, because I think the autopilot's going to crash you into a mountain
Mm-hmm.
uh, eventually,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not like
Yeah.
steering out of the way of things that are obviously going to fly, or you're
Mm-hmm.
obviously going to fly into.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I absolutely agree that autopilot will crash you into a mountain in some way, shape, or form.
eventually it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how sometimes it can take 1 year and sometimes it can take 30 years.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Some people can just, you know, compartmentalize it in the back of their
Mm-hmm.
mind, and just like, well, I've got these kids to raise, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, I think that's also based on what they experienced as kids and what they think is normal or not normal.
yeah,
I see
yeah,
that a lot, right? If
I'll
chaos
just
and
power through
conflict.
this.
What was that?
Oh, they just say, oh, I'll just power through this. And
Yeah. Power
yeah.
through this, or this is what life looks like. This is what relationships look like. And then over time, it's maybe the pain becomes so great that it doesn't matter if this is what relationships look like, because it's not worth it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's not you start to ask yourself, is it worth all this?
Yeah.
And then you bail. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, with your practice, what are some of the biggest transformations that you've seen in people? Are you able to really, like, can you change the human heart, or can you kind of resurrect severely damaged relationships?
Yes. Yes. I love that question. And I just worked with one couple today that, I mean, honestly, I am so moved by where they've come from. And, I think again, I want to talk high level, but I have seen and do see couples come from the brink where
Yeah.
they've also seen other couples therapists and it hasn't worked, and they've done the work, and maybe they've done the work for years and it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
A particular couple that stands out to me is one where there was ongoing infidelity, and
Oh
it was
no.
really
Yeah.
traumatic. And on top of that, there was addiction, right? And
Oh
so,
geez.
yeah, so you can just think about the amount of heartache and shame. And
Yeah.
that couple is in a really, really different place.
They're, the one person forgave the other and they were able to move forward, huh?
Yeah, I think they engaged in a process and they've certainly moved forward, but it's a continual process. It's learning to talk about it differently in a way where they are expressing themselves more vulnerably. So instead of the wife who was the one that was betrayed, starting to
Yeah.
just get angry and mean, rightly so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that instead she's able to start to say, I'm feeling really scared right now. That fear is coming up. I'm getting triggered, right?
Mm.
I'm worried I'm not important to you. And the husband has come so far. At first, when our first session, he said, I don't know how much longer I can tolerate this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know how much longer I can talk about this. Right?
Yeah.
That's
So he
how
was like,
overwhelmed.
he was like, well, if she's not going to forgive me, I'm just going to leave.
Yes.
Is that kind of the vibe? Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
we've seen therapy, we've done therapy about this for 2 years. She should be over it by now. There's nothing else I can do. And now he's in
Yeah.
such
Yeah.
a different place where he is able to respond and comfort her and
That's really cool.
be non-defensive, which is just amazing.
Yeah. 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 It's really fascinating to me how couples going to therapy, uh, you'd think that they'd be able to work it out on their own. Clearly, that's not the case because divorce rate is so high.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're like, okay, well, I love you and you love me, let's figure it out, and we both want to work it out. But I do feel that um, a third party, at least for a large percentage of people who know what they're doing, a
Mm-hmm.
professional who can come in and diagnose, who's seen success with these different people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, could actually solve it,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're hacking their limbic resonance
Yeah,
system,
yeah. Yeah, well, the
You're
cycle
like,
makes people hopeless, right? I think that's a huge part of it, and that people love each other all the time, but the cycle what I call the cycle takes over, where they go into protective mode instead of connection mode, because the cycle is happening, because there's this lack of safety, right?
yeah,
One person sees the other person being more shut down, the other one feels like pressure and criticism, and we're off to the races, and they don't know how to stop it.
yeah, yeah. And it's just like a cycle of emotional abuse and verbal abuse probably, and it just gets worse and worse.
It can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of like cell signaling. There's certain cells in the body that it needs a different cell to come in and like reprogram it. And so I think that's kind of what's going on with people. It's like once you enter a certain mindset,
Mm-hmm.
until something else happens,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly the partner can't do it because they're, you know, they might be the scarecrow or whatever that's
Mm-hmm.
causing this problem for you. I mean, internally or actually,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be a third party who can come in and send those cytokines, those cell signals to the person. Hey, you're okay, you're
Mm-hmm.
safe,
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Now it's interesting how a lot of these practices, they really focus on safety, whether it's like polyvagal theory,
Mm-hmm.
hypnotherapy. It seems yeah, self-preservation is definitely the driving force behind all of this, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Very deep subconscious, and it's something a lot of times we probably can't control, right?
Right. Right.
Because leaving self-preservation up to the organism's free will probably wouldn't work out that well all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
having somebody remember to have their heart beating all the time, or
Right. Right.
uh,
Yeah, our nervous
stay out of the
system,
cold.
it kicks in.
Yeah.
It's so fast.
So do you think a lot of this stuff that's going on is where the partner doesn't feel safe is on a really deep subconscious level, or is it something that's clearly like in the prefrontal cortex they're thinking about all the time? Do you deal with stuff on the subconscious level
Oh yeah.
as much? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that most of what's happening, I would say it's 50-50, because people come
50-50.
in with a narrative and an idea of what's happening, you know, and in the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so they have access to that. But they
Right.
don't oftentimes have awareness and access to some of the things that are driving them and compelling them. And so I think it's 50-50 in terms of what we're working with. And some people would never use the word safety, but
Yeah.
they will use other words, right? They'll say, oh, I just feel judged, or I feel criticized, and all of that is saying, I don't feel safe with my partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And until you feel safe, um, nothing's going to happen. That's right. Like, yeah, like you said, fight or flight mode's going to be on. Cortisol is going to be surging through your system, and a lot of my PhD thesis was on telomeres, which are the caps on DNA, but that unwinds really fast too. So
Mm,
basically, your DNA becomes unwound. You start aging really fast
yeah.
because it's like that. The car engine is just revving. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's ready to
Mm-hmm.
go, and if you can't shut that off, then you can't repair yourself. You
Yes.
know, you
Yeah, that's
can't.
such a great metaphor for what happens with our nervous systems. And if we're in high
Yeah,
stress and in kind of this constant fight or flight.
yeah. So um, when you're doing your sessions, do you feel like what percent are you getting into the subconscious, and what percent are you getting into the conscious mind? If you had to put a number on it, are you really like trying to get in there and root out this, this unsafe, little child or whatever that's in the back of the mind? Or are you really trying to, get at the conscious mind and say, hey, you need to change change comes from within. You need to change your thinking and that kind of stuff.
Oh, way more from the unconscious. I don't work a
Really?
lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Because working with the conscious mind would be more of a top down. It would be more of, hey, here are the skills. You should know how to use these. I'm giving you this paper, right? Okay,
Yeah,
now you
right.
know what to do. Go do it. And I don't
Yeah,
believe that it's because people don't know what to do. I think people know what to do. I think they get hijacked and dysregulated. And so that's what we have
yeah.
to work with.
I see. Okay. And I think that's probably pretty encouraging for people as well, because they feel like it's something that you can access that they can't, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
and you can kind of root these things out,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, people have
and
a
and
lot of
get at
aha
the root.
moments about themselves and their relationship, which is,
Yeah,
I think, exciting for people. And it's hopeful when you have kind of these new insights.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting how a lot of this stuff gets dug out when you're not using your conscious mind, your prefrontal cortex or whatever. You're in a different state, and you can access different parts of the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do need to do some research on that. I know different types of like breath work and LSD
Mhm.
or whatever. Not to keep bringing up drugs, but but different parts of your brain start firing, right? And I wonder if during your sessions with this limbic resonance, you're actually able to, you know, open up different parts of the brain
Mhm.
that the person literally can't do on their own, or
Mhm.
would have great difficulty doing it.
Mhm.
And so it's not that, they don't want to, it's just they can't.
Yes.
And I wonder if I don't know how the brain would do it. My guess would be some form of epigenetics or methylation or something, where it's literally like cutting off pathways to harmful parts of the brain, where you can't, it's like, nope, not going to think about that, la 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 la, and just like totally like put roadblocks in those parts of your brain, but they're there, and then sometimes maybe in your nightmares, or when you're too stressed, that block breaks and you're like, you're like, and because you haven't taken care of it, and the the brain has put kind of a band-aid over an axe wound, but you haven't figured it out, and it's in there rotting you from the inside. But as a defense mechanism, the body is just like, nope, I'll deal with that later. At
Yeah,
a
we're
further
really
date.
good at disowning parts of ourselves.
Be like, that's problematic. I don't want to think about that. So, do you feel that there's some things in people's brains that you should leave shut down? Like,
That's a funny question.
maybe it's something so bad that if, in some session it comes out, it breaks the person completely. Just hypothetically speaking. I mean, I'm talking out of my bum here,
Sure, sure.
to not be vulgar, but I wonder if there's a reason why some things are shut away, and just put away. Clearly it's like the body's more concerned about the immediate present rather than the future person, so it's blocking these things out, right? So you can function day to day, and if you don't have a therapist there to root this stuff out, the body, that's the only way it handles it. But I wonder if there's some things that you should just leave, let sleeping dogs lie, or whatever. Maybe you can completely compartmentalize it away and let it just sit there. And no.
I wouldn't say yes or no to that. I think I have my personal thoughts on that, but as a therapist, I would say, how is that impacting you? Are you
I
able
see.
to be close and connected and have secure relationships? Do you feel at peace with yourself? Do you feel like you are in touch with your own inner world and accepting of your own inner world? What that would tell me is that someone is not befriending their inner world if they
I
are
see. Yeah.
disowning that part, or if they're shutting it out. And in my experience, the problems happen when we are shutting out parts of ourselves.
I see. Okay. So you would recommend rooting it out regardless, and just finding a way to deal with it, find a good answer to it, and then go
Well,
from
not
there.
necessarily an answer to it, but I think this would depend. If it was in couples therapy, I wouldn't necessarily root it out in couples therapy. I would say maybe we need some individual sessions.
One-on-one, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right. I don't know if it's going to be safe to bring it up in couples therapy. I know
yeah.
I know that I can handle most things.
Yeah.
Most things, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But so yeah, I think it depends on the context that someone is in, and
Yeah.
also if the therapist, right, if it has to do with something like child abuse, or right,
Yeah.
being a perpetrator,
Yeah.
I probably am not the person that you want to talk to about that, because that's not my specialty, and I don't know how
Social
to help
worker or
someone like
something,
that.
yeah.
Yes.
Guidance counselor. Yeah.
Someone where that's their area. For me, it's relationships, and it is trauma, but it's not being a perpetrator of trauma. It's being the victim of trauma.
Being the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would say if it's like actively damaging the person, that's when you need to go in and root it out.
Yeah. And
But
do people realize if it's actively damaging them or not?
actively damaging
Right.
them. Let me see. Yeah, yeah, because I think a lot about evolution, probably way too much. It's like how men think about the Roman Empire every 5 seconds. That's like me with evolution. I was in school for way too long, and so now it's just all I think about all the time. But and I wonder about these things, right? Like why they evolved and why they're so common
Mm.
and why um, they're there. And I wonder if sometimes I think is it straight up damage or is it adaptation? You know, like blocking things out. Is it something that
Mm.
clearly it's something that's beneficial in the moment? And there's something in like a lot of my research was in the biology of aging, but it's called antagonistic pleiotropy. Basically, what that means is it's a short-term
Mm.
sacrifice or no, long-term sacrifice for short-term gains.
Mm.
And so it's something that is beneficial when you're younger, but it damages you when you're older.
Mm.
And so there's certain genes in the heart and things like that where when you're younger, it makes you more fit and
Mm-hmm.
active and that kind of stuff. But later, those genes are still kicking around and they cause problems.
Interesting.
And so I wonder with a lot of this stuff, maybe it's beneficial in the moment, maybe
Yes.
like we were talking about it where when you're in the courtship phase, when you're trying to impress somebody, you want to block all that stuff out, you know, all your demons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, I'm gonna your genes are like, I'm gonna get this person to reproduce,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I'm going to block out all these horrible things that this person has done and you know, or has done to them. And then, well, you know, they'll reproduce and then I'll be good, right? I've done my role as the chromosomes to
Mm-hmm.
take this person over. And then but then they're in a marriage and in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
and all these things. And so you know, that person has to deal with it then, and it all comes flooding out or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
I think it's 100% adaptation,
yeah,
personally.
it's not damage necessarily. It's not
Oh,
like
and I never think it's damage. I think it's 100% our nervous system helping us adapt to environments, right? And to what are there people that we can go to and talk to these things, talk to them about these things? If not, then yeah, our nervous system is going to help kind of shut it down, right? In
yeah,
order to so that we don't have to live in perpetual pain or discomfort or right stress.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's why I asked the question. Maybe it's better to just let that part of the person's brain. Maybe it's so horrible, you know, that just just leave it in there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's the case because it probably is something that even if you dig deeper grooves in your brain so that the brain doesn't think of that, I think eventually it will always go that way. And so finding a way to root it out. And yeah, I think about it a lot biochemically speaking, because I know with addicts and different things like that, they're forming these myosin chains in their brain, and then once you're addicted, you've literally so every time you drink or whatever it is, you form another layer around the axon,
Mm.
and then it gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, and then you've got a really strong connection, right?
Wow.
And so it's this really it's just like a wire, you know, like the thicker the wire, usually the better the transmission across it. And so every
Mm-hmm.
time you do that, it's like muscle memory, like a baseball player,
Mm-hmm.
where you know every time they swing that bat, they're getting better and better and better at it. Where if you're because it's forming that myosin, and it's same thing with anything else, like drinking or whatever else, it's forming that super thick myosin,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually it's so strong that it's very very hard to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets so strong that the only way to beat it is to do something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
that can counteract it and build a stronger myosin chain, and you go, you know, in a different direction or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think especially with relationships, you, those people probably get those really deep grooves in there, and
Yes.
they're just like, that's just how I act, you know, that's just who I am, and it is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But and a lot of times it's toxic, and you have to catching it early, or early intervention, just like cancer. Don't let those grooves dig in so deep that
Mm-hmm.
you become a toxic partner or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or the relationship becomes toxic,
Yeah, and part of what my goal is to help people create new neural pathways. That is what we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. I'm preaching to the choir here.
You're not preaching to the choir because you are way more science knowledge person than I am. But I just, in terms of emotionally focused therapy, that is one of the goals of emotionally focused therapy is to help create new neural pathways
Okay.
through these
Is it
new
is it
experiences.
redirection? Okay, new experiences. Okay, so it
Yeah.
is redirection.
Yeah, it is. It is redirection. It doesn't feel like redirection because it's a little bit more subtle. But I think that again, from someone sitting out, it can totally look like redirection.
Okay. So they're not, yeah, especially if you're in a relationship for a long time and it's really toxic. I
Mm-hmm.
think your brain is heavily wired to stay toxic probably. And so the only answer I would think, speaking as someone with some biochemistry knowledge, is to uh, do something else because it's
Yes.
there, right? And it's
Yes.
there for a very long time. Eventually it starts to break down
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Just like how if a baseball player stops playing baseball for a few years, they're not as good at it,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so depending on how long it's been going, so just like that, the same thing's going to be happening. But
Yeah, and that's what when we talk about corrective emotional experiences, the point of those is to create new neural pathways. And so again, we're trying to create new experiences, new information over and over again, so that, and the more I ask people to do it in session, the more they're able to access that outside of session.
they can do it on their own, and
Yeah, of course, that's the
teach a
hope.
man to fish. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't have to keep coming 2 or 3 times a week or whatever to
Yeah, who wants
unlock
that,
their
right? I mean,
right,
really, who
right.
wants that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been extremely enlightening, Hana. um, I don't think I've spoken at length like this with someone who practices in this manner. So this is I think our views are very aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking for someone who's more of a sciencey person,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds like you're a sciencey person too, but you're more in the metaphysical realm. But no, I mean, everything you said makes sense to me.
I love that. I'm
Sounds
glad.
right.
I love making
Sounds
sense to
right to me.
people.
Sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially with the limbic resonance thing.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I learned something new, and I've learned like that's an actual thing that's going on. I couldn't explain it while the LSD thing was going, and why that would even be there. It's like why would I be syncing up with this person? What biological system is working, and why is it working, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But it's probably just syncing up with a person, and we
Mm-hmm.
evolved to rely on each other and develop loving relationships. And that's probably something going on deep in the brain that can help us, this limbic resonance thing where you can literally sync up with a person,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy to think. And it's probably something that's really hard to do a hardcore scientific study on, but it's something that um, is clearly happening.
Yeah, and it's how our brains and bodies function best, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what's so cool to see from so many different studies is that it's very clear that our brains and bodies function best when we are in limbic resonance, when we're in a
Yeah.
safe and secure relationship.
Yeah. When you're in the zone. And that's probably how it works with teammates and that kind of stuff, when you're all kind of jiving together.
Mm-hmm.
um, Probably with war and things like that too, when you're all when you're all synced up. So it's probably something that's very deep down in there in the hypothalamus, or
Yeah.
as well, where it's just like it's something that helped us survive, and it's something that helps us to stay in strong, committed relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, the hypothalamus is totally part of the limbic resonance.
oh, okay, yeah. So, all right, my knowledge of physiology is helping me understand this stuff a little bit.
Yeah, you
But
got it. It's part of the limbic system. The hypothalamus is.
okay, okay, yeah. So, is there anything in particular that I left out that you wanted to end on, or did we cover all of psychotherapy in one session here.
I think we covered a lot. I just
Yeah.
love that we're able to talk about this. And, I think that part of the reason that this is important to me is just because I think the stronger relationships that we can have, both with ourselves and others, the stronger families we have and the stronger world we have,
Yeah.
the more loving. And so
Yeah.
that's part of why it's so important for me to help people with relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes life much, much, much more pleasant when you're in a happy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And anything you can do to make sure that keeps going is definitely a positive thing. And it definitely sounds like hacking into the limbic resonance system is probably one of the best ways to do it that I've heard of, at least,
Mm-hmm.
where you literally sync up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I hadn't heard of, even with a PhD in physiology. So I'm sure 99% of the population probably hasn't either. So
Yeah, well, they can read a book called A General Theory of Love, is I think where the term was coined.
Okay.
So if people want to read more, it's a good
It goes into detail
yes.
on specifically what it is, and
Exactly.
I'm going to look into that
I
because
didn't make it up,
I'm
I
very curious.
promise.
Yeah. You're just trying to sound smart, throwing out names of books.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Hannah, and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, bye.